Okay, welcome to Bet the Edge, back in New Orleans, Louisiana, Wednesday. Big week in the Big Easy. I'm Jay Croucher, here with Drew Dinsick, as always, on my left. And on my right today, very pleased to welcome in Aaron Schatz, creator of DPOY, Chief Analytics Officer at FTN Fantasy. Thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Thank you.
How are you enjoying New Orleans? What do you think of New Orleans as a Super Bowl city?
I think it's a great Super Bowl city. There's obviously a ton to do here. It's nice and warm. The hotels that they put us in are at least very close to the convention center, which is very close to the Superdome. So everything is well contained, which is a problem with places like next year in Santa Clara.
Yes.
So, I mean, they can have it here all the time as far as I'm concerned.
Magnificent convention center. Very underrated convention center here. A ton of space. This is my third Super Bowl with NBC, and I think this is a better kind of setup than Vegas and
It's
Phoenix.
very different from last year where you had to walk through Vegas casinos in order to get from place to place. This is a very different feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Super Bowl naturally, but it's NFL honors tomorrow night, and you are one of the 50 AP voters, and no, you can't give away your vote, but interested to hear some of your thought processes on these awards, and I'm particularly interested in Defensive Player of the Year. This is a unique year where typically it goes to the number one edge rusher, but Patrick Surtain, he closed the favorite. Just wondering how you balance kind of positional value in defense with a cornerback as opposed to the traditional edge rusher candidates.
It's hard because you also have to balance. I mean, you have to balance a number of different positions. Like maybe you're considering an off-ball linebacker like a Zach Bond. Maybe you're considering an interior lineman like Jalen Carter or Zach Allen. You have all kinds of different stats, and nowadays in the era of advanced stats, we have all kinds of additional stats, whether it's stuff that I do with DVOA, like coverage for cornerbacks, or whether it's stuff that they do from next-gen stats, like pass pressures. And it is hard to balance what different positions mean and figuring out. What I do know is that the way that they phrase the award is the best all-around season, I think suggests that you want the player who did the best compared to the average at his position for Defensive Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year, as opposed to the language around MVP, which is very specifically about the most valuable, which is why so many of us vote for quarterbacks at this point.
Do you have trouble unraveling kind of player performance from team success, or do you pretty much start with the top 5 DVOA teams and then try to break down players?
No, especially for Defensive Player of the Year, you absolutely have to separate, because there are times where the Defensive Player of the Year will be on a defense that's not overall very good. I mean, think about the years that Max Crosby has had over the last couple of years, while the Raiders' defense is not very good otherwise. One defensive player affects a defense, even the best defensive player affects a defense much less than a quarterback does on the offensive side of the ball.
Well said. Yeah, well said. As far as quarterbacks on the other side of the ball, I remember you famously had Josh Allen last year. You were the lone guy, and that hit me specifically because that would have been my vote.
Mine as well.
It for most of this season, the narrative around the MVP has been, at the end of the day, the dust settles, and Allen having one and Lamar having one, even if they're the wrong seasons, so be it over these 2 years. Do you get the sentiment that that there is a bit of a makeup coming for Josh Allen, or is this a little bit more clear-cut Lamar this year?
I don't know, because Jackson was the clear winner for first-team All-Pro.
Sure.
So what you need to have in order for Allen to win is either a number of those Jackson voters from All-Pro vote for Saquon Barkley for MVP, or that people feel that there's a difference between the best quarterback and the most valuable quarterback, which is something that I don't really believe in.
Sure.
I really believe when you're voting All-Pro, you're voting for the best quarterback, and when you're voting for MVP, you're voting for the most valuable player, which really is the best quarterback. But there is an argument to be made that Allen doesn't have as much help as Jackson does. And I think that the two teams are a little closer than some people think, but some people definitely feel, in particular because of Derrick Henry, that Jackson had more help. But of course, Jackson made Henry this year as much as Henry made Jackson, because mobile quarterbacks help their running backs, no matter whether that's Henry or Barkley or James Cook.
Yep. I think the consensus would be that Josh Allen probably has the better offensive line as well, which balances out some of the advantages.
Yeah, maybe with pass protection. I'll tell you, in ESPN's pass block win rate, they're third and fourth, so they're neck and neck.
Oh, okay.
Yep, no, that's fair. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there is a divide between the MVP vote and the All-Pro vote. I know a few years ago, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, there were 6 people who flipped between having Brady as first-team All-Pro, but then going with Rodgers as MVP. I would be with you, like, the best quarterback is surely the most valuable quarterback as well, but people get themselves twisted with these things. I want to ask you about Comeback Player of the Year, Aaron, which is very... From a betting perspective, has been a compelling market the past couple of years. Just wondering how you approach it in terms of the comeback story, in terms of the most adversity overcome, which last year would probably lead you to a Damar Hamlin, and this year would kind of bring guys more like a J.K. Dobbins to light in terms of the amount of adversity overcome? Or do you see it more as the player who qualifies by being injured and plays at the highest level, which is more your Joe Burrow?
Now, it's interesting because your question doesn't get to the heart of the controversy about the award, which
I was going to ask about Darnold as well.
Right.
But, yeah.
As far as what you're asking, it's a very hard question.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I did put out a poll to my readers last year, and they felt that the best comeback was more deserving of the award than the best player who came back for something. But it is a hard difference to split between, do you want the best player with a good comeback? What about how good is the comeback? Do you want, does Hamlin count coming back 2 years after his injury? I mean, most of the reason he didn't play last year was that he was still recovering from the injury. Yep. So I think his story still works for Comeback Player of the Year. It's a really interesting one to vote on.
Okay. Now, I guess final question for you about these awards, at least in terms of, picking your brain. The Coach of the Year is notoriously difficult to quantify, I think. And as someone like you who is so focused on sort of a data-based and numerical look at the game of football, what do you do to try to tease out coaching performances that really stand above the rest as you come up with the criteria?
Because you don't want to just give it to the guy who raised his team the most over expectations, because Andy Reid, the reason why Kansas City's expectations are high is because Andy Reid is such a good that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
The reason why Detroit had high expectations this year was that people knew Dan Campbell was a good coach. It is absolutely a subjective award. I mean, there's no analytics that you can do. You have to decide, guys who took teams and turned them around, like Dan Quinn and Sean Payton and Harbaugh, versus guys who lead good teams every year, like the other Harbaugh or Andy Reid, versus, how much do you credit a coach for being specifically important on one side of the ball? Like, how much does O'Connell get for the fact that he made Sam Darnold look so good, because he is, in effect, the offensive coordinator for that team. Yeah,
I have a tiny little axe to grind about the way that this market has gone. Fine. You want to give it to KOC? Fine. I had relatively high confidence that the Washington Commanders were going to be a bottom 3 defense this year.
Yes.
And what Dan Quinn in particular did to get that group to perform the way they did, I think, is being completely overlooked in this one.
I don't think they had I think they had a bad defense this year.
Okay.
What they had was Jaden Daniels and a great offense, so I would give more of the credit. I mean, but Quinn deserves credit for the other part of coaching, which is the management of the locker room, and the fact that he got those players to believe in themselves, even if the defense wasn't that much better than it was before.
Okay. Because KOC and the offensive coordinator side of things, if Minnesota having a 12th best offense with Sam Darnold under center, sure.
Yeah.
They have Justin Jefferson and they had outstanding tackle play.
It's a hard award to. There are 12 guys I could have voted for, honestly, and made a good case for why I voted for them. And you only get 5 spots.
Yep. I think to your point, this is arguably the most subjective award. It's the award that usually has the most fractured field, where you have guys winning with 19 out of 50 votes constantly. And I think we may see a similar situation. Kevin O'Connell closed the big favorite. I think he is most likely to win, but I don't think he's going to get greater than 50% of the vote. If he does win, I think it would be more with a plurality, but with a lot of guys. Wouldn't be surprised if there are 6 guys who get first place votes.
I will say the one analytics thing is that I'm an analytics guy. We like coaches who go for it on 4th down. Yeah. I'm more likely to vote for coaches because I think they're smart if they go for it more often on 4th down. But it's not the only thing I consider. Andy Reid is one of the most conservative coaches in the league on 4th down. Sure. I still think he's one of the best head coaches in the game.
Yep, well, he has a quarterback that can't.
Exactly.
Can't,
just lastly on that, actually, and it's not so much related to the award, but do you think Dan Campbell, do you think he is analytical, or do you think he just makes the same decision every single time, regardless of?
I think that analytics probably helped convince him to be so aggressive, and now it's just part of his makeup.
Yeah,
That checks
because
out.
I thought I was all in on Dan Campbell being very analytical until he went for it on 4th and 7 in the Cowboys game against the Lions at the end of last season. I was like, that wasn't the analytical decision to make there. That was just wanting to end the game by any
Yes,
means
but I
necessary.
wouldn't be surprised if the analytics people were part of how he started off this way, that from the minute he became a head coach, he was one of, if not the most aggressive coach in the game.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Drew and I will be broadcasting an NFL Honors Show Watch Along Thursday night on our NFL on NBC Sports YouTube channel. We'll start shortly after 9 p.m. and be with you all the way through the MVP award announcement. And before we get to the Super Bowl, every game means a little bit more as the big dance approaches, so don't miss 17th-ranked Wisconsin take on Iowa this Saturday. Tip-off is set for 1 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. Okay, let's jump to the big game. Aaron, one of the most interesting things to me about this game is the fact that, so this is mainly in the betting market, but the betting market bakes in as though the Chiefs have an extra gear in the playoffs, and they raise their levels specifically. There are a lot of theories behind that. It's very hard to distill exactly what that is, but I think there is something to Mahomes scrambles more in the playoffs. He puts his body more on the line. They use more of the quote-unquote real plays in the playoffs because they typically have a healthy lead in their division, and they can afford to have more kid clubs in the regular season. Do you buy into that the Chiefs should be bumped up a tier as a team based in the playoffs above what they did in the regular season?
I think so. I don't know. See, it's interesting because if you look at my DVOA ratings, they are about 10 percentage points better in the playoffs than the regular season on both offense and defense over the last 7 years.
Yep.
And that would suggest that there is this extra gear. And some of the reasons that you gave are good, like logical reasons why it could be. It's also possible they've just flipped heads 7 times in a row.
Yeah.
and we don't know which of those for sure. But I think after 7 years, there's enough of evidence for it that even if you think some of it is luck and some of it is that they actually do have an extra gear, you have to give them a little bit of a bump up. And you also, I point out, you look at my numbers for the full season, you have to get rid of Week 18.
Yes.
Yeah, surely.
Because the Eagles didn't care, and then the Chiefs took not caring to a whole amazing level of not caring and got slaughtered by the Broncos in a game that meant nothing.
Okay, you bring up some interesting points, and I love all of this, and I have to kind of dig in on Eagles. So I'm a little bit on Eagles Island, I feel like, here at the Super Bowl. I mean, obviously there's a lot of Philadelphia fans in the building, but not a lot of people agree with me that the wrong team is favored in this market. And I look specifically at the way that this defense and the arc of the defense has gone throughout the season, and you do a very particularly good job, I think, of kind of reflecting the strength of opponent when you come up with a fair rating for a defense. And a lot of times how you perform as a defense really is just a kind of reflection of who did you play, how good were those quarterbacks, and how did they perform against you. Do you see anything with the kind of long arc of this Eagles defense that suggests to you that this is going to be one of the tougher tests that the Chiefs have faced?
Yes. If you look from Week 7 through the playoffs, if that had been the Eagles' rating for the entire season, they would have been one of the top 10 defenses I've ever measured going back 47 years. There's this stat going around that Patrick Mahomes is 8-0 against Vic Fangio defenses, which is true. But this defense is on another planet compared to those Broncos defenses, and especially the Miami defense from last year, which was 23rd in pass defense DVOA. This defense is so much better than what Fangio has had to go up against Mahomes in the past that I really do not care about that 8-0 thing.
Yep, that makes sense. That Miami defense also had no players left by the time they played.
Right, no edge rushers, right? Bradley Chubb was out and Jalen Phillips was out.
Yep, exactly. What do your numbers say about Jalen Hurts? Because 2 years ago when these two teams met in the Super Bowl, they were the top 2 finishers in MVP. Hurts was the favorite for MVP before he got hurt late in the season. And now I think that the bearish case on the Eagles would be that this is a big mismatch at quarterback, and there is fears about Jalen Hurts and how he's going to go up against Spags' blitzers. Do you think Hurts has regressed over the past 2 years?
I think a little bit. I think it's possible that people looked at film and figured out places where he can be stopped. He was 16th in DVOA against the blitz. He's one of the most blitzed quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best designers of blitzes. I mean, I think Steve Spagnuolo may be more important to this game than Patrick Mahomes, to be perfectly honest, if the Chiefs pull away with a win. Another really interesting stat is Hurts is terrible against cover 3.
Sure.
And normally, that is the kind of thing that randomly fluctuates from year to year. But Hurts has been terrible against cover 3 for 3 straight years now. But the defense that plays the least amount of cover 3 is Kansas City. And when Kansas City and Philadelphia played last year, they didn't play it against Hurts on a single down.
I love this. See, I mean, I was hoping for some cold water, but you're just fueling up my fire.
Now
here.
Here's my cold water.
He did say he thinks the Chiefs are going to
Here's
win.
my
I
cold
know, but
water.
I feel like you don't believe it.
The blitzing, the Spagnuolo, that Spagnuolo will beat Hurts in the mind.
Sure.
And the other is, I feel like the Eagles' offense, but in particular their mental offense, like their psychology, is so dependent on Saquon Barkley's explosive runs.
Of course.
And Kansas City is a great tackling team that was phenomenal at stopping explosive runs this year. If Barkley doesn't get the explosives, it really is on Hurts' shoulders.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the most interesting thing about this Super Bowl, in a way, is the fact that the Eagles, so much of their success this year and so much of their statistical profile is based on all of these games where they're constantly playing with a lead. And they've played, and a lot of Saquon's best games are against defenses like the Commanders and the Cowboys, and destroying the Rams, who don't have an amazing defense. And I just wonder if that there is a lot of inflation behind the Eagles' offense and their defense to an extent as well, because it's easier to play when you have a lead and you know you can rush the passer. Do you think there is anything to that?
Oh, absolutely. Saquon played a very easy schedule of opposing run defenses. He had 9 out of 16 games in the regular season against bottom 10 run defenses in my numbers. But when he did play the better run defenses, he still had good games.
Okay, now
Baltimore,
I gotta beat the drum here a little bit. The run defense that was on the field for the Chiefs in the playoffs would have ranked 30th in EPA per rush allowed over the balance of the season with the performances
what
they
we've
had
seen in the first
Texans
2 games. Yes, against the
Bills,
they were giving up. But
who's to say this isn't another one?
Well, I trust the whole season more than I trust the playoffs.
Okay.
But then if we're talking about the Chiefs, aren't we saying that we trust the playoffs more than the regular season when it comes to their offense? So maybe we should according to their defense.
Also,
but I would go with what they've done all season, which is stopping explosive runs.
The explosive part, I think, is pretty key. But there's been a degradation over the balance of the season that was pretty stark. They were top 5 in the first half and like 17th in the second half, and then the wheels fell off in the playoffs, and it didn't cost them.
We'll have to see, because Barkley's running, the style of the Eagles' run offense has been not a lot of 4 and 5 yard gains, a lot of 1 and 2 yard gains. He doesn't get stuffed for 0, but a lot of 1 and 2 yard gains, and then suddenly 60.
Yeah.
Some might qualify that as boom or bust, and
it is a little bit boom or bust. But I mean, the amazing thing is that line, when they get him holes, then once he gets into the open field, he does magic.
Yep. And as much as there are those boom or bust elements, so the Eagles I believe they were 9th in success rate, rushing success rate this season. So,
so there's still a good amount of booms.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, the NBC Sports Now channel is live all week from New Orleans. Get insider access and analysis from Mike Florio, Matthew Berry, Chris Sims, Dan Patrick, and Dan Lebitard. Plus, don't miss interviews with NFL stars, coaches, and celebrities. The NBC Sports Now channel is available on Peacock, the Roku channel, Samsung TV, and more. Visit NBCSports.com/now for more details. Okay, Aaron, before we let you go, just wanted to get your thoughts on some prop markets, player markets in particular. And to me, the most interesting way into this, there's a lot of analysis around Saquon, who's set at 112.5 rushing yards, which is obviously a huge number. But to me, the most interesting part is the Chiefs' passing game, where that is where the most variance is, because Juju Smith-Schuster is apparently the wide receiver 2 out of nowhere against the Bills. DeAndre Hopkins has 9 straight games as a Chief of getting 29-plus receiving yards. Now he's playing 12 snaps. Do you think there is anything matchup-wise or just overall that you think in this matchup will emphasize a particular Chiefs pass catcher?
I would de-emphasize Travis Kelce.
Okay.
The Eagles were number 3 in DVOA against tight ends.
Okay.
Now, I've seen stuff on the line where they talk about Oren Burks replacing Nakobe Dean, and Oren Burks had trouble with Kelce in last year's Super Bowl because he was on the 49ers.
Yep.
But if you look at who covered tight ends for the Eagles, it was not Nakobe Dean, it was Zach Bond, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Cooper DeJean. So I think they're going to have – I also think if there's a lot of 12 personnel by the Chiefs, you're more likely to get Noah Gray open than Kelce, and Mahomes is going to go to his open man. And I'm sure that the Kelce number is artificially inflated because of the Taylor Swift fans. So I would go under on Kelce. That's probably my favorite player prop for this game.
Okay, do you think that there's potentially a wrinkle in the way they utilize him as opposed to just him being sort of a glorified decoy, which it felt like he was against the Bills?
I mean, the thing is, I sort of, it depends on how much man versus zone the Eagles play,
Sure.
because if they play a lot of zone, then Kelce's like, I'm Mr. Get Open, absolutely,
Yeah.
in the zone, and him and Mahomes are so on the same page as far as where he's going to go to find the hole. But I just, I don't see this being a big game for him. I think it's more likely that we see a surprisingly big game for Noah Gray than that we see a big game for Kelce.
Okay. On the Eagles side of the ball, Jalen Hurts, his passing attempts prop is set between 26.5, 27.5, that type of range, which to me is remarkably small for a quarterback who is an underdog playing against Patrick Mahomes in a dome with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith as his receivers. Do you suspect, and a lot of the discourse around this game has been the idea that Spags v. Hurts is the pivotal matchup,
Yes.
but to get to that matchup, they have to stop Saquon first to unlock that kind of battle. Do you think ultimately that this game will force Jalen Hurts to be throwing much more than he has in the regular season?
I do. I don't know about much more, but I do think more is likely because I do think they are going to keep Barkley somewhat contained. He'll get an explosive. There'll be at least one. But if they can keep him somewhat contained other than that, I think most people see this game as the Eagles will take a lead and then Mahomes will lead a comeback and the Chiefs will win. I think a more likely scenario is that the Eagles' offense struggles, the Chiefs take a lead, and then the Eagles can't come back, and the Chiefs win close by shutting the Eagles' offense down at the end rather than the other way around.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys see correlation between not just Kansas City, but under as well then.
Yeah, I did my model and it came out with the line exactly what Vegas had, but I think if I had to choose between over and under, that I would choose the under, yes.
Okay, like it. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for stopping by. Can you tell people what you're doing this week and where to follow you?
I mean, I'm here talking to people for FTN Fantasy. My website is ftnfantasy.com. It's not just fantasy. We do a lot of betting. It's not just football. We do a lot of other sports. We have a code if you want to get an early subscription that will take you all the way through fantasy and betting season next year. Early 15 is the code. You can also find me on social media. I'm AShotsNFL on Twitter and AaronSchatz.com on Blue Sky.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Aaron, creator of DPOY, Chief Analytics Officer at FTN Fantasy. We appreciate it, and have a great week. Enjoy New Orleans. We'll see everyone soon.